This is the all-new Polar Pace Pro. This is my thumb that I sliced open, trying to change the watch bands with those little pins in here with those jagged edges. Yeah, and I don't even care about changing the watch band. I was just gonna do it to show you guys how it's done. I'm, perfectly fine with the white watch band that comes with this. So yeah, it I don't know, probably wasn't worth it. So last Wednesday, Polar announced two new watches, the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro. Both watches are geared towards runners. They have bright new screens and faster processors. I've actually had the Pacer Pro model for about 2 weeks now. In this video, we'll go over all the details of the Polar Pacer Pro. We'll look at GPS accuracy, heart rate accuracy, and we'll talk a little bit about what this watch means for Polar's lineup, because this watch actually does a lot for $300. And the Pacer Pro is actually available as of the recording of this video, but the regular Polar Pacer that costs only $200 isn't quite available yet. You can actually pre-order it now, but it should start shipping next month. So I don't have that one to test just yet, but I will try to get a hold of it so we can kind of compare the two watches in a future video. And I'll leave links to where you can buy, both of these devices in the description of this video below. Now, I know that I should probably save my opinions till the end of this video, but one of the things that I really like about the Pacer Pro is the overall slim size and weight of the device. The Pacer weighs 40 grams, and then this Pacer Pro only weighs 41 grams. So it's not a massive watch. It's 45 millimeters in diameter and about 11.5 millimeters in depth. The screen is a 1.2 inch display, 240 pixels by 240 pixels. It is not a touch screen. And Polar has increased the quality of the screens here. For example, here's the Polar Vantage M2 right next to the Polar Pacer Pro, both of which cost $300. And to my eyes, I think it's a big difference. And, really, you do want a bright screen on a watch. I really have a problem with that Vantage M2. The screen brightness just being one of the things that's annoyed me most about this watch. And on the Pacer Pro, you actually have an adjustable backlight now as well. And the operating system is gonna feel a little bit snappier just because they've beefed up the processor. Now it's about twice as fast as that Vantage M2. And the new hardware also has a barometer, which means it's got some tricks up its sleeve, like hill splitter, which is it's kind of this feature that allows your watch to track the numbers of hills that you do on a given run. So if you're doing like 10 times a 1 minute hill, this will actually track all of the climbing for you. Now, the watch also has running power, which is nice to see. It has Strava Live segments, and there's a new running index to see how you compare to other runners. They're your age and your gender. And while it doesn't really have mapping, it does have turn-by-turn directions via Komoot. Now, the watch band itself is a 20 millimeter, and you actually can switch it out, but you'll need to change out the way that the band actually attaches to the watch body. Polar calls it their shift adapter, and it's basically these two little pins that come out, and then you can kind of add two plastic bits to allow for more of that kind of standard 20 millimeter watch band. I actually found it, very difficult and annoying to switch out, obviously. But it turns out that the pins that you use on the shift adapter are ever so slightly longer than the default ones. I don't know, just don't slice your thumb open when you're trying to change your watch band. And then as far as color options goes, you've got carbon gray, aura green, autumn maroon, midnight blue, and this one, which they are calling Snow White. Perfect for me, I figure. But then as far as battery life goes, both the Pacer device and the Pacer Pro have a 273 milliamp lithium ion battery that'll go 35 hours in GPS mode or 7 days as a smartwatch. They have a new charger. It's called the Polar Charger 2.0. And I don't know, I'm a little disappointed because, you know, if you're like me, you have multiple Polar watches and you can't just use any old charger that you already have. You've got to use this new one. But, you know, I guess that the charger does charge faster. Faster charging is always better. So I guess it kind of like trumps everything else. I don't know. Now, if you are familiar with swimming with a Polar watch or biking with a Polar watch, those activities really haven't changed here. Polar isn't my favorite brand when it comes to, you know, swimming or biking. I'd love to see Polar add, you know, a drill mode to their swim tracking activities. And then on the biking side, I'd love to see Ant Plus, so I could connect to like a variety of different bike tech, like a Varia radar or a power meter or speed cadence sensors or things like that. A lot of those things are Ant Plus on the bike side. But if you're just doing some casual swimming and biking and you're not worried about doing swim drills or kick sets or connecting to various bike gadgets, then I do think that you're gonna be pretty satisfied with the Polar Pacer Pro. But Polar, they're marketing this watch as a running watch. So let's take a quick look at GPS accuracy when running. And Polar is saying that both of these new Pacer watches have a new GPS antenna design. And in this data set, we're gonna compare the Pacer Pro in dark red here to the Garmin Epix in purple. And by the way, the Epix is gonna be set to all systems plus multiband, meaning that it can use multiple GPS satellites to track at the same time. And then lastly, the Garmin 945 in that light blue color. And on this trail route, you know, as you can see, the Epix is, you know, clearly gonna be the favorite here. And then both the Garmin 945 and the new Polar Pacer Pro, you know, they do get off from time to time and they just kind of vary slightly from that purple line. And then on this run, you'll kind of see the same kind of stuff. You know, it doesn't track perfectly well. And even though this one, you know, is just in a neighborhood, not in any sort of thick forest or anything like that. And, you know, after looking at a few of these files, you know, I would say that, you know, the Pacer Pro is on par with a lot of the watches that we were seeing in the past, maybe a couple years ago, maybe not quite as good as a lot of the watches that are currently coming out to the market right now. But on the back of the watch is what Polar calls their Precision Prime optical heart rate monitor. And it's good. It's made of 10 LEDs across a range of different wavelengths for deeper light penetration. Also, you know, having different colors should help with different skin tones. I've only tested it on my skin tone and my wife's skin tone. And it has 4 lights that detect or pick up the light returning through your blood vessels. They've also made the optical heart rate monitor a little bit slimmer, and maybe you won't end up with that kind of like heart rate monitor impression on your wrist after you've been wearing these watches for a while. But the heart rate data that I've been seeing coming from this particular watch looks pretty good consistently. I actually think that this might be Polar's best wrist-based optical heart rate monitor that they've made. So slimmer design, decent accuracy, really good stuff to see here. Now the Pro has a variety of different tests that you can perform, kind of like recovery test stuff or help to determine your VO2 max estimation. There's a new one that's just like a walk test, basically kind of like a walk ramp test. It's new to this device specifically. I think that it's probably intended for people who don't really run all that much. It might give you questionable results if you are a runner, but I'm guessing that the walk test would potentially be ported to other watches like the Vantage V2 or the Grid X Pro watches, just with like a software update. But it is interesting. The Polar Pacer Pro, it really does have a large amount of features that are typically saved for those higher end devices. You get stuff like daily activity tracking, sleep plus stages, and nightly recharge, which is definitely one of my favorite features on these Polar watches. Fuel wise, which is kind of like drink and food reminders for those long rides or long runs. Training Load Pro, Polar running training programs for popular distances like 5K, 10K marathon races. After training, you can see which energy sources you spent most of your time with. They call it like energy sources feature. So that's like whether you were burning fat or carb, things like that. There's also a Fit Spark program, which is a kind of cool suggested daily workout. Fit Spark even provides little animations to show you how to do certain exercises. And the watch works well with most smartphones. It'll display notifications, but new to this watch is the ability to actually display notifications during an activity. It's a small thing, but it's just something like Dave Dillon and I have been talking about for a long time, Dave Dillon from Chase the Summit channel, and I have been hoping that Polar would just make notifications available during an activity, and that's probably been a couple years that I've been wanting this. And with the Polar Pacer Pro, you can also control music that's on your smartphone, and that is different than onboard music, but it is something that I find useful, especially when I'm on the bike and I don't have to like dig around for a smartphone in my jersey pocket or something crazy like that. Now, I think some people are going to be disappointed that there isn't more new features here. And I think that that's understandable, but I do think that it is impressive that Polar has made a very compelling watch with a lot of corrections to some of my biggest annoyances with devices like the Vantage M2. Stuff like screen brightness, stuff like a slow processor, if we're being honest. And at this point, I really don't feel like anyone should be considering that Vantage M2 as a decent purchase. But if you do like Polar and you are all in on Polar's extremely impressive ecosystem, especially with their Polar Flow app and all that has to offer, I do think that this is a great option for you. Now, there are some very good competitive options out there. Garmin Forerunner 55, for example, or the Coros Pace 2. Both of those have very long battery lives. Both of them cost about $200. I should also note that the Coros Pace 2 at $200 does have running power, like the $300 watch here from Polar. But those are both very different watches than what you get with the Pacer Pro. Polar is offering, a lot of their top of the line features on this watch, and it's priced pretty competitively. And as far as, affordable triathlon watches goes, I think this is a pretty amazing offer. So I do feel a bit divided here. On one hand, there's not a ton of new features here from Polar, but on the other hand, they've got some, much needed basic improvements to things like screen brightness and processing power and little things like the notification thing. All of that at a really decent price point that I think makes this one of their, most compelling watches currently in their lineup. I will leave it to you guys. What do you guys think? It might be interesting to kind of like double back on a topic like this, talk about, all of the triathlon watches that are in that kind of like $200 to $400 range. But either way, be sure to get out there, swim, bike, run, rinse, and then repeat it all over again. And we will see you guys on the next one.